Hello and welcome to StarK's monthly webinar, which is held the last Wednesday of every month at 12 noon. Today we're very sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties. I'm not sure if it had anything to do with the riots or not, but something got into our system and Baruch Hashem, we are here now. I'm Rabbi Zvi Goldberg, your host, and today we're very pleased to have with us Mr. Nachman Schachter. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Schachter is the president of the NWCP, Northwest Citizens Patrol, here in Baltimore. And after we speak with Mr. Schachter for a little bit, we're going to be joined by Rabbi Frankel, who's our director of the Halachos Institute at the StarK. If you'd like to see the archives of these classes, and we've had every month for the past couple of years, you can go to kosherclasses.org, or you go to our Vimeo channel. You can send us an email at info@star-k.org and sign up for information of when we have the classes and what the topic is going to be. Thanks for bearing with us with the technical difficulties. So, Mr. Schachter, if you could give us some background of the NWCP just for a minute, what does your organization do?
Thank you very much, Rabbi Goldberg. The organization has 400 volunteer active members for the last 33 years. We've been around for a third of a century. Our members patrol on a 7-week cycle. Every 7 weeks they patrol. 8 cars go out at night. And our patrol is very unique because our rules are you stay in the car when you patrol. Meaning if you see anything going on, you radio it in. Every individual gets a radio and a map to stay in a specific area. And you radio in anything that you see that needs to be taken care of. We are unique because we have a police officer that rides with us to address any issues that come up. Our patrol has addressed anything from stolen bicycles, kidnappings, we've even stopped a bank robbery. And
wow, I don't remember that. Okay.
That was in the early days.
Oh,
absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
And what is very unique.
Did you get the reward for that?
I don't think there was a reward on that
Okay.
one. But what is unique, is that the police department has stationed a police officer with us who rides with us every single night, and he's there. We ride from 7:30 to 10:30 at night. So he addresses any issues that come up.
It's really, this organization is really known nationally as one of the top, or the top, citizens patrol in the country. And I see when I go to I see all the awards, and so it's really very, very well known. So what's the NWCP doing differently now with the situation here in Baltimore? Is patrolling as usual from, what time is it? 7:30
to 10:30 at night.
Right. So is there anything different?
Well, the first night we did not have a police officer because all officers were stationed to go to where the riots were.
So they took away the police officer?
They took away our police officer. There were no police officers. No one knew this, but there actually were no police officers in our whole area. And but last night, now we can know about it. And now you can know. But last night we were the only area that had a police officer. That's how much they trust us, and that's how much they know that we're effective. We had groups that went out last night. They did not have, our groups usually go out with their lights on at night. We have lights that go on the top of the car because we're not undercover people. We want people to know what we're doing and that we're out there. Last night we did not go out with any lights because if there are any individuals who decided they wanted to throw things at our cars, we would not let that happen. So the mayor...
So wait, so you didn't want to have the lights because that attracts attention?
That attracts attention, but yet we were out there supervising and making sure that everything was quiet.
Mm-hmm. I see, okay. So we had the curfew, or the famous, or infamous curfew. I don't think I've ever been under curfew before, except maybe during the snow, maybe, or something. There was one...
It's true, we had a curfew for the snow.
We had a curfew for the snow, right?
We could not go out and drive.
Right. But that wasn't scary.
That was a driving curfew, but
driving
that was
curfew,
not in the street curfew.
Right, that wasn't a scary situation. So, I mean, basically they're saying that since 1968 there's not been a curfew here
That is
for
correct.
a security curfew. So,
That is correct.
so let's talk about how that affected the Jewish community, the shuls, the schools, and so on.
The mayor called a curfew Monday evening. Tuesday morning, I walked into shul early in the morning, and I met the president of the Aguda of Park Heights, and he said he was talking to Rav Heineman late last night, and they were discussing with all of the minyanim that are going on in the Aguda. We have the most minyanim in town. They go till 11 o'clock at night, and we have people learning in the Aguda till 12 o'clock at night.
Rabbi, excuse me for 1 second. Rabbi Heber, when he was on here once, he pointed out that the Aguda has the most Ashkenaz minyanim in the country.
Correct.
Right? Because there are many shtiblach who have more minions, as minion factories they call them, but they daven the nusach svar. So anyway, okay, go ahead.
Okay. Parenthetically.
But you're right. But I guess last night that wasn't true because we cut out some of those.
Cut out some of those. So he said, Rav Heineman said to him, well, let Nachman Schachter decide whether we should have the late minyanim. So I discussed it with the president, and it was clear, if the city decided to have a curfew and that it did not want anyone on the street, we should certainly abide by those rules and not have any minyanim after 10 o'clock. So it was decided that at 9:30 that would be the last minyan. No 10 o'clock, no 10:30, no 11 o'clock minyanim. The Aguda would be closed at 10 o'clock, which is what happened. And there were other shuls that followed suit. It is important to know that our area has over 4,000 families and 30 shuls, some of them in the city, some of them in the county. Those that are in the county are much further removed and really are under different rules than the city because there is no demonstrating going on in the county, no riots going on in the county. While those in the city, even though our community itself is not near the riots or demonstration, but we're closer. So we follow the rules. I'm close with both the city and the county, but the information that we're getting as far as the demonstrating, we're following the city rules. And so the Aguda and other shuls are closer by. So those other shuls did close earlier, and they had to re-examine their schedule.
So tonight, that's not. Wait, it's still in effect tonight, right?
It's in effect for the whole week, through Shabbos, through Sunday.
Okay.
So the next thing that came up was the schools in the public schools were closed. Our Jewish schools were all open. They opened on time. The question was, because there was some demonstrating that was supposed to occur, what would be? Should the schools stay closed, should stay open, or should they leave earlier? And the city police suggested very strongly that they should close because those demonstrations were supposed to organize at about 3:30 when the schools would be letting out. And if the demonstrations were developed as thought and kids would be coming out of school, that would not be a good thing.
Okay, so they closed the schools early. Here's the phone number that we do have that's up on your screen. 218-895-1203. Again, 218-895-1203. Passcode 2020#. And so you can hear it by phone. If you have an available phone, you can try that. Okay, so is there anything happening? And yesterday was pretty quiet, right?
Yes,
is there anything
was quiet.
Anything that happened today, or is anything that we should know about? Or
Well, right now, everything seems to be in a holding pattern. Things are quieter, and we're hoping for them to stay quieter. The next issue will be Shabbos, because we do have a curfew, and we know there are shalom zachers, there are bar mitzvahs, there are events coming up on Shabbos, and what will we do as far as the curfew? So we're very fortunate, since we have a great relationship with our major. Our major is in charge of our district, and he has told us that he will be quite lenient with us. He knows that there really is no trouble in our area, and the only thing he's concerned about is if some individuals decide to come into our area that we have to be careful. So he'll be lenient with us. We can stay out later, but we need to be careful. So as far as that is concerned, Shabbos is concerned, basically, we should not have a problem with the curfew.
okay, that's good to know. I didn't realize that. I was wondering what would happen. So everybody can go about like normal. Just be careful because of the situation.
We will make everyone aware of it, and it's time.
I see. Someone told me that maybe you can authenticate this. That in 1968, there was the riots that happened then, and they told me that a non-Jewish person took upon himself to stand outside the yeshiva, Ner Yisrael, which was on, I guess, Garrison Boulevard at that time, which is in the midst of the city, and he protected the yeshiva from trouble.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Did you hear that story?
I heard other stories, but not that one.
Okay, all right. I don't think at this point they need it. The yeshiva now is way far out. You know, it's in the county. I don't even think that. I mean, that's many miles away. So I don't think they would have that issue right now.
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Schachter, is there anything else you want to leave us with? Any other updates that we need to know, or?
It's just certainly the Mishnah says El Moy Marah Ish Israel Chaim Lo, that if not for police officers and fear, people would eat each other up, and unfortunately that is what we're seeing. And people need to fear the police, and police need to make that we're afraid of them. And if that's not what happens, then these are the results. So
right. I would tell our listeners who are from outside Baltimore that we're also really, at least myself, following it only on the news. I mean, I wouldn't know that anything was going on other than the news. I don't see anything differently. It's not, Baruch Hashem, has not actually affected us directly. So
that is very true. There hasn't been anyone that has been accosted in our area. There has been no vandalism, no property loss in the whole Jewish area. So even though it is a couple of miles from us, it is downtown, and it is nerve-wracking, however, our area, Baruch Hashem, at this point in time, is totally safe. And we do have relatives and friends calling, all hyper and nervous. What is going on? We were happy to report at this point, nothing is going on. And Mitzvah Hashem, that should continue.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. And good luck with all your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. So now we'll turn to Rabbi Frankel. Okay, so let's talk about some of these security issues that come up, the halachic issues that could come up under such circumstances. There are many things that are applicable only on Shabbos, because during the week a person acts as usual,
right.
Generally. And some of these things are only applicable on Shabbos. So and we're not going to preface all these with God forbid, right? Because we could just keep repeating that. So we'll just say once, Chas v'sholom, if any of this happens. What would a person do if he sees a robber breaking into his house on Shabbos? What is permitted to be done?
Well, it's very important that the police know what's going on in our community, and that the police are informed, and that our community works with the police. I have to say that people just had the opportunity to hear from Mr. Schachter. When it comes to dealing with the police, there are often people who have frustrations, and they tend to be vocal about their frustrations, and they tend to be antagonistic with the police, and that can just lead to distrust and confrontation. A much smarter way to do things, which Mr. Schachter has led our community in for many years, is to work closely with the police, to get involved with the police, and he really is the liaison, and he has done a tremendous amount for my community in fostering this close relationship which our community has with the police. And much of it is done behind the scenes, much of that is done quietly, because that's the nature of the work, and people do not necessarily know how much effort, how much time goes into it. It's been many, many years, and I think our community owes a tremendous amount of gratitude to Mr. Schachter for that. If a person does see a robber breaking into his house, so again, on Shabbos, unfortunately, the NWCP, which drives around, is limited. On Shabbos, our modern technology has not yet come up with a Shabbos car app over here. We won't get into that discussion, but so we're not able to drive on Shabbos, and there are unfortunately people around. If a person sees a robber in his house, so as we know, one of the fundamental rules in Yiddishkeit is v'chai behem, that a person is meant to live, and with the exception of course, the three things which are Yaharik Val Yava, that a person should get up his life for, not to kill somebody, not to worship Avodah Zarah, not to be involved in a riot. Other than that, a person is meant to protect his life above all other things. and included within that is Shabbos. The person is protecting his life supersedes concerns of Shabbos. If a person sees a robber in his house, he should assume that it's a risk to his life. The Torah tells us about the concept of Baba Machteres, that if somebody breaks into your house, then the Torah does give a person rights to necessary to kill the person. Again, I'm not suggesting that a person should necessarily do that in their own house, but certainly to protect themselves in whatever way they can do. And calling the police is
that's the least he can do.
It's the least he can do. That's right.
Now, what if he's breaking into let's say you see him not breaking into your house, but into your store? Like, in other words, there's nobody there. It's obvious there's nobody there. There isn't any danger to life. Can he still call the police under that circumstance?
Right. So when it comes to Shabbos, when his life is at stake, or even if there's a small possibility his life is at stake, it doesn't have to be a large possibility. Even if there's a small, somewhat remote possibility, a person is allowed to do whatever he can to take himself out of that danger. If he sees a robber breaking into his store and there's no one in the store, and there's no concern about danger to life, the only concern is monetary loss, that the person might walk away with some of his belongings, so then a person is not meant to himself directly break the Shabbos in order to save himself from monetary loss. But we do have a principle that a person is allowed to ask a non-Jew and instruct a non-Jew to do something which itself is forbidden by the Rabbanon. In other words, asking a non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbos is itself a rabbinic prohibition. And if you're asking him to do something which is also a rabbinic prohibition, so then the halacha tells us that asking a non-Jew to do something which is prohibited rabbinically is permissible in a case of loss or substantial loss. So asking a non-Jew to telephone, to call the police, generally we understand that using a telephone doesn't involve any fire, any heat. It involves electricity. There is discussion among the poskim, but the primary opinion is that that's a rabbinic prohibition. So therefore, one is allowed and one can ask a non-Jew and tell a non-Jew, instruct a non-Jew to call the police. If the person sees, not only if he sees a person breaking into his store where it's already in the robbery is already in the process of happening, but if he sees suspicious people looking into his car and it looks like they're about to steal it.
What about if he sees them walking away? They already stole. They already stole something.
Right. So again, if he sees a crime about to happen and it's going to involve some monetary loss to him, so then again he should ask a non-Jew to call the police. If the crime's already happened, so then it would depend. That's a very good question. It would depend on the situation. If it's something where the robber is still in the area, and if the police came right away, they'd be able to apprehend the robber and thereby prevent further similar incidents happening. So then, yes, then a person should ask a non-Jew to call the police, and the police will come and hopefully will apprehend the robber. If it's already been, if that's not the situation, for example, if a person wakes up in the morning and their car has been broken into, and it happens presumably sometime in the middle of the night, and the robber is long gone, and there's no evidence, and it's just a question of informing the police, but it's nothing that there's nothing they can really do about it immediately. So then it can really wait till after Shabbos. A person could tell a non-Jew about it and allow the non-Jew to do whatever he wants, but to instruct the non-Jew to call the police, I don't think he should do it.
Oh, that's a good example. His car is broken into. There's probably not that much they can do.
What I would probably do is walk to the nearest 7-Eleven. There always seem to be police officers there.
Tell them directly.
Yeah, you can definitely tell him. If a police officer comes and you talk to him, he's going to write down the information. That's fine.
No
that's not a problem. You're not telling him to do that. And that's fine. Even though you know he's going to do it, and even though it's clear as you see word by word he's writing it down, that's not your concern, and you're allowed to do that unless you happen to know for sure he's Jewish. Then that might be an issue, but generally that's not the case.
So let's move on to alarm systems, which is something that people, when they want to have it to protect themselves, but they don't work so well with Shabbos, because how do you walk out your front door if the alarm is on, right? So you want to be able to walk in your front door, even though it's alarmed. So there's a bypass switches. Let's talk a little bit about that issue.
Right. So a very very common question. a person has to think about this way before Shabbos comes in. Obviously, a person should, before a person buys an alarm system, a person should look into the various things that are out there.
There are people who install, who know the different ins and outs of the alarms.
Right. There are from people
the bypass switches and so on.
These are the people who run these kind of businesses, have been in contact with Rabbonim and have got psakim, and they will be able to to tell you what to do, not only from a practical standpoint, but also from a halachic standpoint, and they're great sources of information. In general, if you really have an alarm system in your house, so what a person would want to do is have the alarm system set up in such a way that the alarm will go off if his windows get broken or things like that, but he wants to be able to walk through his front door without setting the alarm off. So generally they have some way that a person should be able to bypass the front door. Now there are two ways you can bypass the front door. You can bypass the front door that the alarm will not ring when you go through the door, but the system will still be aware, and the computer will still know that somebody's going through the door. There's still a motion sensor which is detecting a person going through the door, it's just that it doesn't actually cause the alarm to go off. And then there's also, sometimes you can bypass the whole motion sensor itself. So ideally that would be the best thing to do if you could make it that going through the front door doesn't, the computer doesn't even recognize that, doesn't even register, that would be the best. If that's not the case, if the computer know in the sense that the computer will, the computer will gather that information. The motion sensor will detect a person going through the door, but it will not cause the alarm to go off. So that's a question which a person will have to ask their own rabbi. Rabbi Heinemann over here, the posik for the Star K, his general psak is that the criteria for malacha taking place on Shabbos, for a prohibition taking place on Shabbos, is that the event has to be something which is perceptible to one of the 5 human senses. So if a person walks through the front door, even if the computer registers it, but if no alarm goes off and nothing visible happens,
no lights change, no
display changes,
no bypass,
no light changes,
nothing, you don't see anything.
Nothing happens, then that's fine. Now many people misunderstand this. They think that if I have the system in my garage somewhere, no one's in the garage, that makes it fine. That's not what he means, because that is visible to the human senses. It's just that you're not there to see it, but it is visible. That would not be acceptable, even if you go and you cover it up, and then then I can't see it because it's not visible to me. No, that's not included within this heter. That's closing your eyes doesn't mitigate the problem. But if it's something,
let me just summarize. If I have a bypass, right, on the front door, and I open it, and now I can open the door, and there's no lights that change. There's nothing on the keypad doesn't register, zone 1 open. Nothing happens. I don't see anything. There isn't anything that's happening. It's all internal. I know the computer knows that it's open. That Rabbi Heinemann says is okay.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Very good. So I just wanted to point out that while you were speaking, Rabbi Frankel, I twisted the microphone to the opposite way, and it seems to have affected the sound quality much better.
Good,
so
good.
Not everything is so sophisticated, and sometimes there's simple answers to the difficult questions. Okay, now sometimes a person sets his alarm, and the alarm, he puts on the bypass and everything, but somehow he made a mistake and the alarm goes off on Shabbos. So what's going to happen is that the police are going to come. Right? If you have it set up like that, the police will come, and they'll see it's a false alarm. Is there anything that you should or can do about that situation?
That's a good question. So there are different ways that the police might find out about it and come. Some alarm systems are directly connected. Again, I'm not so technically advanced, but my understanding is that there's some alarm systems which are directly connected to the police station, that as soon as the alarm goes, it'll register and they'll automatically know about it. And then there are other systems where it'll make a loud noise, but somebody would have to inform the police about it. If the police are going to...
well, usually the way it works here, at least in Baltimore, is if you want the police to come, you have to have a central monitoring station that will get the registered alarm. They will call you. Is that right, Mr. Schachter? Okay, right. So they will call you, and then they will ask you if it's a false alarm or not. And if you don't answer or you say there's an emergency, then they'll send the
Okay,
police.
so they're going to call you. Okay, that makes sense. So they're going to call you.
Right.
So the question is, are you allowed to pick up the phone and answer them? So again, I think every person should ask their own rabbi. I'm not sure if this is universally agreed upon, but my understanding from behind him and from my conversations I've had with him is that he's concerned that if people have these systems and there are alarms go off and no one picks and you don't pick up the phone because it's Shabbos, and then the police are going to come and then they're going to get there and they're going to see it's a false alarm and they're going to ask you, why didn't you pick up the phone? And you're going to say, because it's Shabbos. And then it's going to happen a second time. Then it's going to happen a third time. So eventually, soon enough, that after 1 or 2 Shabbos, the police are going to say, they're not going to take it seriously. And then they're not going to respond. So therefore, it is very important to know, even though right now it might be a false alarm, but if we want them to turn up when there is a real emergency, when there is a real case of pikuach nefesh, which if there really is a bug, again as I said before, there really is a robbery taking place, then it is a case of pikuach nefesh. So therefore it's necessary that the police take us seriously, and therefore, if necessary, a person could respond. If there's a non-Jew available, then that would be the best, but that's generally not the case. The person could respond, the person could try and respond with a shinui maybe, to take off the phone with in an unusual way with the elbows. I'm not sure if it's
so he feels it could lead to a pikuach nefesh.
Yes,
if you don't
right. Basically a person should, basically I believe that Rabbi him feels that a person can answer if necessary. Again, but this is something a person should really try and avoid. A person should, a person has to take it, we don't want to do this, we don't want to break Shabbos if we're, even in a way which is answering the phone again. Answering the phone, as I said, is Rabbanan, but we don't want to do that. So the person really has to make sure before Shabbos that they set the system up properly. Again, it's quite common. I get these questions. People come on Shabbos. I forgot to set it up. I forgot to do this. When a person wants to really be part of their regular Friday schedule, is to make sure it's set up well. But yes,
I had it once years ago, maybe a decade ago, where my alarm went off. I didn't set it right. I didn't pick up the phone, and the police came. It was very lazy kind of. They came like a half hour on Shabbos afternoon, a half hour later. I don't know what their response time is normally, but I did get the sense that they probably felt, well, it's a Saturday afternoon, it's that neighborhood, probably not anything serious. And I told them, it went off by mistake, and they left. But since then, whenever I want to open a window or that it might be alarmed, I check to make sure that I'm allowed to. I asked one of my children to go check the switches to make sure that they're set, that I could open the window. And thank God I haven't had that. I haven't had a false alarm since then. So I'm just, I think I agree with you. You have to be very careful not to take it lightly that you might cause an alarm.
And we have to be very careful that the police do not kind of dismiss us because they think that we don't take it seriously. It's important that they take it seriously and respond. So therefore we have to do whatever it takes to make sure that happens.
Okay. I want to ask you something about having, if a person, God forbid, has a they were setting some fires. The rioters were setting fires. What happens in case of fire? But I want to tell you this morning I was looking around. And I found some interesting discussions. Rabbi Bleich, J. David Bleich, has a sefer on various halachic issues, and he discusses there, and he brings from the Tzitz Eliezer in 1948, and in later years in Israel, they have had times when they need to leave their radio on Shabbos to be able to hear any important announcements. And I was thinking, what would be if, I don't think that this Shabbos is going to be, it looks like things are calming down. It doesn't look like we need to be on edge as much. But what would be if what happened Monday would be Shabbos? We certainly would want to be informed of what's going on. And we don't really have any way of knowing, are the riots moving up to the Jewish community or not? So, would it be permitted to leave a radio on?
Yeah, go ahead. A person could leave his radio on, just he should leave it on at a low volume. In other words, it's considered a zilzul, like disparaging for Shabbos if there's loud noise coming from a machine in a person's house in an unusual way. I mean, air conditioners we leave on all the time. That's not the same. But so having a loud radio that would not be appropriate for Shabbos. But if necessary, a person could leave on a radio on a low volume and then walk over next to the radio and sit down and listen to the news if they felt that it was necessary for them to know during the course of Shabbos what's taking place.
So the Tzitz Eliezer says that to leave a note on it, like on the knobs, that says Shabbos Kodesh, so you wouldn't come to fiddle with it. And everybody should know that I know that it's Shabbos and I'm just doing this for security. As Josh points out, in Israel they have a silent station that doesn't broadcast anything. It's silent on Shabbos unless there's an emergency, and then they broadcast. Of course, in Israel there's another issue that we wouldn't have over here, which is that the people broadcasting are Jews themselves, and you would be listening to their whatever, if you didn't have this special station, you may that causes another concern. In America, that's not an issue.
Israel has this problem, which is not really part of our, not something which we really on our minds. But there, the police are Jewish, everyone's Jewish. Whatever you're doing is not only involving your Chilul Shabbos potentially, but also that of the responders as well.
That's a good point. The other thing that he brings, Rabbi Bleich, is what if you have a caterer, and there's a caterer is running an event, and there's some security concerns, and so they had a wedding planned, and there was some a war or concern, and so the question is, when the customers canceled because they couldn't make it from the United States, wherever they were coming, they canceled the event, and the caterer could not book an event last minute, so he had a loss. And he discusses who has to pay for it and so on. His bottom line is, Rabbi Bleich, is sort of that it's an indirect loss. It's not a direct cause of a loss, and he suggests that if the customer did not yet pay, then he would not have to pay. But if he did put down a deposit, he would not be able to get his deposit back. So that could be something that could happen as well. I mean, if there's a wedding, we had there was not in this situation, but a few years ago when there were some blizzards, we had that kind of story where the weddings that were curtailed. I don't know if they were canceled, but the people couldn't come.
It may depend on the fine print in the contract.
Right. Okay. I'm sure there's something that the caterer probably has something in there to protect himself in that case. Right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about a fire. If there's a fire, let's say, the riots reach the Jewish area, and he sees his home is on fire. What is he allowed to do? What must he do? What can he do?
Right. So, technically, the absence of a lot of factors, the halacha would be that if there's a fire which is burning down a person's house, and there was for sure no danger to anybody's life, this house was in the middle of an empty field and there was no one in the house, so then a person putting out a fire is one of the malachos on Shabbos is lighting a fire or extinguishing a fire, and a person would not be allowed to extinguish the fire, and his house would burn down. However, that's practically speaking, we would not apply that because we live in urban areas, and the assumption is that if a house catches fire, the fire will spread, and there are neighboring houses, and even if there's no one in this house, there'll be people in neighboring houses, and it's a potential case of pikuach nefesh, and therefore nowadays, if there's a fire, a person would be allowed to put out the fire himself if necessary, and certainly, I'm not sure, and certainly he would be allowed to call the fire station to come and put out the fire. I think that the primary lesson that we should learn from the Gemara, which says that person should not put out the fire, is not a practical lesson, but perhaps an ethical mussar lesson, that you have this person who owns a house and everything he owns is getting burnt down, and Shabbos is more valuable than that, it would be worth it for him to keep Shabbos, even though he's going to suffer the loss of everything he has. So we can learn from that the importance of Shabbos, but practically speaking, due to the potential danger to life that would ensue in an urban area. If there's a fire, a person could put the fire out. If the fire which is at least a fire which has any potential it might spread, a person could put that fire out, and a person could certainly call people, professionals, to come put out the fire.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was, I heard once a shir from Nachman Schachter from YU, and he said when he was younger, he was at his father-in-law's table. His father-in-law was a big Tam Chacham, and there was a fire at the table. The candles fell, and the tablecloth caught fire. So, what do you do? What do you do? What should we do? So they asked the father-in-law, what should we do? I mean, halachically, what should we do? So he said, he couldn't focus for a second. He said, get a Mishnah Berurah with a good index, because he wanted to, because I have to look it up, I don't remember. So anyway, okay, they didn't, that was sort of, they took the tablecloth and they put it into the bathtub, and then that was a practical way of extinguishing it.
Right.
But
Right. I think that there's an important lesson from the story, which is that even though, as I just said, if there's any potential danger to human life, a person can put out a fire. But that's not always the case. Sometimes they're very localized fires, and we have a principle that even though we said that a person should not put out a fire if there's no possible danger, but indirectly putting out a fire is permissible if it's placed in a situation where there might be some loss. So if the tablecloth catches fire, one's for sure allowed to, according to everybody in any situation, one's allowed to pour water around the edges of the fire, so that when the fire will spread, it'll get extinguished. One's for sure allowed to do what you said, to pick out the tablecloth and take it outside, put it in the bathtub, put it in a place where the fire cannot spread. So,
but if you have any suspicion that won't work,
right, then you should just
put it out.
You should push it out. If there's even a remote possibility that it might spread, you should push it out. But if it's clear that there's another solution, then you should do that. And again, what the post can call gram kiboy, which is putting out the fire through a groma. Again, putting water around the sides, or putting the object in a place where the fire will go by itself. That's certainly permissible. One can do that, himself without any qualms.
So, what can a person do to mitigate any fire problem before Shabbos?
Right,
what should he be doing?
So, apart from the riots that we had here in Baltimore and unrest, we had this really tragic incident in New York not long ago, where there was this, again, tragic fire, which unfortunately caused the loss of life. I think that any person has to take to heart that when we see such a tragic thing taking place, we have to take to heart and make sure that we are fully protected. The most basic protection, of course, is to have smoke detectors in every room in a person's house, working smoke detectors which a person checks and makes sure they're working. That's the most basic protection, that a person can't just say, I'm going to trust in Hashem. A person has to do the basic things that he needs to protect himself. Very important that a person do that. A person has to be very careful, again, that this incident which took place in New York, a person has devices which are made for Shabbos use, but unfortunately they're not necessarily always made by people who have the technical sophistication to make sure that their equipment is completely safe. I think that we have to appreciate something which the Starkey has done, which the Starkey was the forerunner in, the leader in, which is that the Starkey works with companies that manufacture ovens like GE and other companies, similar companies, to get them to make the models in such a way that they're compatible for use with on Yom Tov, and then it comes with their warranty and their protection, and their engineers are guaranteeing the safety. Something that a person wants to buy equipment, which again, does the underwriter's laboratory, it has a symbol on it that it's been checked, that we know it's safe. Person has to be very careful with their Shabbos candles. Again, people sometimes, I feel, are not careful enough. They light it every week, so they get used to it, and they don't think about the fact that they have this open fire there in their house. Person has to be very careful to put the candles in a place which is safe, to not leave them unattended if there's any possibility that there's any danger which take place. Sometimes it's very, unfortunately, it's so easy for the candles to shift. People have these little oil containers which they put oil in and they light, but the glass containers can crack and then the fires can spread. The person wants to make very careful that they make sure that they're really careful. When I grew up, this was back in England. I was born in England. When I was a teenager, there was this really tragic incident where people had candles. They left them near their curtains. Their curtains caught fire, and again there was a loss of life, a real tragedy. Even though a person's doing a mitzvah, and we do have a principle that the person doing a mitzvah Hashem protects, but the Gemara tells us that they're not in a situation where the damage, where the potential for harm is common, then a person is expected to protect himself. So the person has to protect himself again. Ultimately, a person can never avoid real uncommon things. When it comes to really uncommon things, a person has to trust in the Ribono Shel Olam, that the Ribono Shel Olam will protect them. But things which are common and foreseeable and relatively likely to happen, so that's a person's responsibility to take the steps necessary to avoid anything unfortunate happening.
Okay, Rabbi Frankel, thank you so much. I think we'll take that opportunity to close the webinar. If you have any questions that you'd like to address to the Star K or to Rabbi Frankel, send them to info@star-k.org. And what's your email directly?
Halacha, H-A-L-A-C-H-A @star-k.org.
Okay, they can reach you directly. If you have any questions, 410-484-4110. If you'd like to be on our list of, to be informed of when we're having the webinars and what topic it would be, send us an email again to info@star-k.org, or give us a ring. I see there's been some discussion back and forth about Hatzalah, discussion about how calling Hatzalah on Shabbos, that itself could be a topic for a whole webinar, but I do want to say, to address that just briefly, is that the Hatzalahs are usually very well connected with the Rabbanim, and they're asking their questions about Shabbos, and they have halachic guidance as to what they do, and so usually they know exactly what is okay and what is not. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thank Ms. Debbie Rosenstein for helping us technical side, and Rabbi Reuven Chapman also. These webinars are recorded and archived. You can get them at kosherclasses.org, or you can look on Vimeo and type in star-k kosher, and you'll come up with all of our webinars. Thanks very much, everybody. We hope everybody will be safe. Have a great week. Take care. Be well.